All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Fifer. This is Conversations on Retail, and we are here this afternoon with Michael Connolly, the founder and CEO of Retail Monster. Michael, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good, good. Well, you and I have known each other, certainly known of each other, going back to 2000, I guess, when I joined Walmart's marketing team, and you were running a region for what was in Walmart's Tire and Lube Express division, managing, I think, like 3,000 associates, something like that. But you and I never really had any close interaction, and I probably know you better through my experience working for your father, which was like the best, the best season of my career at Walmart. But I'd love for you just to kind of introduce yourself and start. I have a tendency of starting these conversations going all the way back to childhood, and I won't ask you what your favorite color was or anything like that. But I am curious about where you grew up and some of the early experiences you had with people or sports or whatever that really kind of shaped you in those early years and helped to kind of maybe predict where you ended up.
Wow, that's pulling on the past strings. But yeah, no problem. I grew up in Rochester, New York, home of Kodak, Xerox at one point, iTech, Champions, Sportingswear, and pretty much everyone moved out with the exception of Kodak, which isn't saying much these days. But and grew up in Rochester, New York, and grew up in a small town called Rush Henrietta, and actually a big town, and played sports throughout my youth, and was quite the baseball player, and had 32 scholarships dropped in 1 week's time when I blew out my elbow in high
Oh my
school.
goodness.
And chose a little boutique college called St. John Fisher,
Mhm.
and went to St. John Fisher. I'm a product of a divorce, so a lot of people are like, "Oh, I know your dad and mom." I was like, "You don't know my mom. You know my
Yeah.
stepmom." And now I call her mom, Pam. And so I went to St. John Fisher. And my senior year, my father at the time, Bob Connolly, I think he was a vice president of jewelry at
Mm.
Walmart. He had just shown up at Walmart, and I went down there for an internship in 1993, and got introduced to Doug McMillan. And my dad actually said when he introduced me to him, saying, "That guy right there is going to be the CEO someday. Maybe not the next one, but probably the one
Yeah.
after." And he
Yeah. A
called
lot of
me that
folks saw it coming, didn't they?
lot of talk. I mean, this is 19, again, this is back in 93. So,
Yeah.
and then, graduated and wound up working for Walmart in several divisions. I started in logistics. So after my internship, I went right into logistics. I was in warehousing, 6 different warehouses in 7 years, and came into the headquarters. And right around that time, my father had come back, and he had come back as the chief merchant. He went off to do a Montgomery Ward second term.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, after 11 years at Walmart, I was Bob's son. I worked hard
Yeah.
to get where I was, and on my own merit.
Yeah.
And I was Bob's son all of a sudden. And so I had always been a Disney file. I always watched the Walt Disney Company from afar, grew up
Hmm.
going to their parks and resorts, and they had a job opening there locally in Bentonville. And rolled the dice and left. Left the company, went over there as a director of food, health, and beauty. And when they interviewed me, it was kind of funny. They said, "Hey, would you be willing to move?" And I was like, at the time, being a New York kid in Bentonville, and Bentonville was in its small phase,
Yeah.
I said, "Yeah, please. Do you have any offices in London?" And they said, "Well, actually, we do." So I worked hard, and within a year, they had shipped me off to open up the Walt Disney ASDA office in Leeds, calling
Hmm.
on Walmart in Leeds, UK. And then I opened up the Tesco office for the Walt Disney Company, calling on Tesco, the nemesis of ASDA. And shortly after was promoted to vice president of UK. Then I ran Europe, and then I ran North America marketing. And since that time, I found myself as the senior vice president over at Viacom to run Nickelodeon International, and then essentially the executive vice president over at DreamWorks up through the Trolls movie, running their licensing business for Jeffrey Katzenberg, who everyone in
Hmm.
Bentonville knows because he's always
Yeah.
flying down there, at least he used to. And then, I just had, I was going to start Retail Monster before I left Viacom until DreamWorks called me, and then it'd been on my mind for 3 years. So soon as Trolls came out, literally on the day I resigned, about 6 months before that movie came out, Jeffrey asked me to stay around till the movie came out. And the second that movie came out, I resigned to start Retail Monster, where I actually relocated my family from Los Angeles back to Bentonville, and headquartered the company in Bentonville, just because I knew the skill set. You can't really call your licensing agent Retail Monster without being in Walmart's backyard, and
Yeah.
obviously Target's backyard. And now I have since moved the headquarters to Orlando, Florida. We still have a fantastic team in Bentonville, fantastic team in Minneapolis, California, London, England, Long Island, New York, Kentucky, believe it or not. So we have people all around the planet over the last 5 years.
Yeah. So before you talk about what Retail Monster is, and I want to hear all kind of about the entrepreneurial journey, how it started and how your vision evolved. But you said you had been thinking about it. I think you said 3 years before you started it. Is that right?
Sure. Yeah.
And was it based on frustration? Was it based on white space where you felt like there's an opportunity to play the game differently and exploit in ways that other companies hadn't seen? What was kind of the genesis of the idea?
Yeah, it was really a combination of two things. One is, you know, we had helped studios develop their IP so that they would monetize consumer products a lot more impactfully. So, to a small example, the Turtle Crusher and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is a great example. I knew when that show was being developed that that was going to be our number one selling toy because it's usually around a $49 price point. And I had gone into the CEO of Nickelodeon and said, "Hey, can that truck be in every episode?" She's like, "Of course not." Well, Mike, we're writing stories here. I said, "Okay, how about we do it in the opening credits so it's on the front of every episode?" And she said, "Yes." And it did what it does. It blew out. And I sat there and said, now imagine if I owned a company where we got our stake in that toy. I mean, we sold hundreds of millions of dollars of those toys and said, I think I could do this independently of the big studios, go out there and go ahead and get our hands on brands where we do the same thing for them. The second thing is when you work for a studio, in my Disney days, it was probably 4 out of 5 movies that would come out were blockbuster in my world, which is consumer products. So when you rewind the clock and you think about the movies when I was at Disney, the first movie that came out when I was at Disney was Chicken Little, huge bomb. But then think about after. We had Cars 2, Toy Story 2, Toy Story 3. We had Pirates of the Caribbean. I mean, every single movie we had been making for the 9 years I was there was just a huge hit. Hannah Montana, High School Musical, all these brands were just a huge hit. Well, when you go to the smaller studios at Viacom, Nickelodeon, we weren't 4 out of 5. It was more like maybe, let's say 2 out of 4, which is still fantastic. 2 out of 4 shows would work great. Paw Patrol, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But we also sprinkle in some that didn't work. DreamWorks, it was even less so. DreamWorks, it was, we had Trolls, which was fantastic, and How to Train Your Dragon. Those were our 2 big tentpoles. But in the midst of that, we had come out with 8 other movies that didn't perform as well as those 2. So I had gotten to the point where I just said, you know what, I want to go open a company where we could represent the brands we want to work on. Because when you run the studio's consumer products division, everything's the next big thing. Yeah. Obviously, in the eyes of a CEO over a studio, everything should be as big as Cars. Everything should be the next Frozen, everything. And so, and it became challenging because, like I said, for every Trolls and How to Train Your Dragon, there was 4 or 5 other properties that weren't hitting above the belt in that way, but the expectations were the same. And so I said, there's got to be a way to open a company based on my reputation and what I grew up doing, and based on a team that I've pulled together, where we can still go get our hands on some fantastic brands, but only sign up for the brands that we see relevant in, versus having to take an entire portfolio from a studio who might be hitting a 20% success ratio. And that's what we created here at Retail Monster, is we go out to those IP owners on brands that we think are either going to move the needle or are moving the needle, and we vie for that brand. And we just call on brands that we want to call on here at Retail Monster. We're not forced to deal with every single brand at the same level of a brand like as huge as Trolls.
Yeah. So when you tell me about the decision that you made and how you made it and what the transition was like from full-time employee to full-time entrepreneur. Was it a process of kind of easing out of one and into the other, or did you resign on Friday and start work on Saturday at Retail Monster?
Yeah, I would say, it's funny because I actually resigned from DreamWorks probably, when Jeffrey and DreamWorks asked me to stay on for a while. I'd say it was a good 5 or 6 months time between when I resigned and when I physically left. And so there was 4 months of 80-hour work weeks where I'd put in my time at DreamWorks, and then other time of the week was planning Retail Monster. I mean, I have the original business plan, and I didn't do any outreach to potential clients or anything else, but I really thought about how we can pull a company together that offers a different slate of services than any one of our competitors. And
Hmm.
it's been, our key differentiators have been so gigantic that if people want to succeed, if they want a brand to launch, not just license, you know, you and I could go out and say, hey, let's do a Matt Fifer shirt. Let's get a soft lines company to make
Yeah.
it. And let's hope that supplier sells it in the retail. Our big difference is we don't leave the licensees alone. We support them at retail. We go in to those buyers before they ever go to the buyers, because when a supplier comes in, a t-shirt company, they're putting 80 brands on the wall saying, hey, which one do you like? And if we had done our job as an agent, we would have been to that buyer before them where they say, oh, Retail Monster just showed me these great Hasbro brands. I want that one, and that one. And
Yeah.
that's our deciding differentiator. And so, you know, that last 5 months of DreamWorks was all spent on planning and cadence and getting the exact team from a partnership perspective as well as an associate perspective into the team, a good mix of past experiences and people that we could mold. And, you
Yeah.
know, when my last day was with DreamWorks on a Friday, Monday, we were up and running, you know, with one client.
Yeah.
And it was quickly 10 in less than 30 days. And then, you know, our attrition, our retention on clients is about 95%. You know,
Wow.
we might lose one client per year.
Hmm.
The last 3 years, we've lost one because maybe they've gone out of business as a company,
Yeah.
outside factors. But we've been able to build upon that resume of clients and have kept them all on board,
Yeah.
99% of them.
So did you start the company with partners, with employees, with investors? Did you bootstrap it? Were you a one man operation to get it going? Tell me
Yeah,
about what the structure looked like early on.
no, it's a great question. So, you know, so I started with a couple partners, so, you know, one that had worked for me for several years. And then I brought in someone who had worked for me just at DreamWorks, had worked for someone who had worked for me, and put that individual on a, you know, you get more equity the longer you stick around. And, you know, our first couple deals, we went out and said, listen, if you want this skill set, if you want the team that ran DreamWorks, the team that ran Viacom, or the team that ran Disney, we really front end retainer deal, all of them. You know, we just said, hey, here's our value. We know it's not normal to not just take a back end, but we're going to take a lower back end than normal, but we want a front end.
Yeah.
And we essentially funded our infrastructure through deals that made sense for not only us, but for our.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So now that you've kind of talked about kind of the build up to, and you've talked about some of the things that, you know, a company would be able to do, give the elevator pitch on Retail Monster. What is it? What is it today? And what are the kinds of companies that would come to you for help?
No, it's great. You know, we're careful not to say that we're a licensing agent, because licensing agents typically take brand and sign deals with supplier bases that then go sell product.
Hmm.
You know, we are a brand extension company, and what does that mean? We really have four types of buckets that we monetize. One is we're a family IP licensing company where we sign deals on behalf of Electronic Arts and Gearbox Software, Subway Surfers, the most downloaded game in history. We have a set of brands that we strike deals between them and the supplier base. We're a family product supplier facing company, which means in some cases licensees or suppliers sign Retail Monster on for us to go out and negotiate their deals on their behalf. And we have a good mix of those clients, which includes one of the biggest e-commerce retailers in the world, the Hut Group out of Manchester, England. And our job for them is to pitch studios to get brands that they can represent on a series of their e-commerce channels, which we do proudly. We're also retailer consultants. We have a few retailers that pay us to advise them and ask us to advise them on terms of inbound brands. One of them who is let's say, electronics / video game pop culture supplier. And they would like us to help them pick the right properties because, you know, you have the Walmarts and you have the Targets, you have the Amazon. Well, there's a whole lot of IP that those three don't take that allows these smaller retailers to survive if they do take them and take bets on them. So, you know, there's a lot of retailers really making waves in IP that aren't mass friendly IPs, but certainly have some revenue behind it. And then last but not least, we're content advisors. So we've taken our experiences and early creators, we have part ownership or equity in over 10 brands. One of them that won Nickelodeon Parents' Choice Award last year for Middle School Moguls, which is a girls' television series. We have ownership in these IPs because we come in super early, which is a huge risk for us, but they get our talent early, which is a huge benefit for them. And we strike equity deals with them in order to help them meld their property into something that is good enough for a Netflix, Amazon, Disney, Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, or whomever it might be.
So you just celebrated your 5-year anniversary in March. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What were some of the things that you did right that allowed the business to survive during those early years? And what were some of the things that maybe you missed or not failed at, but maybe you didn't see coming, or that caused you to kind of tweak the original business to get it to where it is today?
Yeah, I mean, we really had two big misses. One, when we first opened up, we actually represented several brands vertically, like your
Hmm.
local reps do, like former buyers do, like former executives do. And you can't compete with those people. I mean, they're fantastic. I mean, they were buyers for 2 decades for a reason. And we were actually finding ourselves in the exact same game they were in. And we pulled out of that quickly. I mean, that was a 1 year mistake. That was the initial startup year mistake. And the other mistake we made is that, I mentioned earlier in the call that we would strike retainer based deals for our services, which we still have a lot of those clients. Um, but we were slow to go aggressively pursue licensed brands. After all, we did start a licensing agent. And in year two, we weren't licensing for anybody. We didn't have a single brand we were licensing for. We were more a retail sales and marketing operation and a content advisory operation, i.e., retailer advisory. And then there's no profit in retainers. There isn't. Because our promise to the companies we work with is that we will spend 100% of those retainers on headcounts.
Yeah.
And when you look at the trajectory of Retail Monster the first 3 years, you see our headcounts multiply. We weren't taking a profit. We were just putting it back into the operation.
Yeah.
And so those were the two things. One, why are we in a vertical business? So we can't compete with these amazing, talented former buyers that are leaving the Targets and the Amazons and the Walmarts and out there pitching now. And two, guys, we have a licensing agent, no brand. So the biggest turn from a success perspective is how do we maintain our base, retail sales and marketing business, which was fruitful and afforded us the headcounts that we had. But how do we get into the profitable side of the business and pick up some key licensing brands? And that's when we went on a whirlwind tour and we met with several of the top brands, and you can find it at www.retailmonster.com. I won't go through them all, but the Harlem Globetrotters, the Emoji Company, the Electronic Arts, the Gearbox, Paddington Bear. We have some fantastic brands that we license for, and that has been extremely profitable. And that's, after all, what we all learned to do at Disney and at Nick and at DreamWorks, and we weren't doing it in year two. And so that's one thing we did to change our race. Another thing is, we found ourselves, once we started picking up licensing brands, we were really heavy on family entertainment brands, which you would say, well, that's natural. You're at Disney and Nick. And I said, yeah, but, we should go, Kelly, who's one of the partners, challenged us, hey, we should be thinking YouTube. And so we went out and picked up Vlad and Nikki, who are the biggest YouTubers in the world, 179 million subs, toy range launching at Target and Walmart and Amazon this year. And then we said, I'm a video gamer. We have some video gamers. We should get into video games. And that's when we went out and got EA and got Gearbox and Cybo. So we've been very meticulous about differentiating, not just getting another family IP. It's been like, hey guys, we have some great family IPs. Let's graduate from that. Let's keep them so we're not selling against ourselves. Let's just focus on them. And let's go out and get IP that's not in our portfolio. Let's go get a teen, tween, and adult IP. Some of the games we represent are 17 and over. So, let's go find those cult brands that people like and are more Hot Topic driven and more Spencer's driven. And so I'm really proud of how quickly we were able to diversify our portfolio out of family IP. We still do family, it's at our core, but we have stopped picking up new brands so we don't sell against ourselves. And we owe that to our clients, Hasbro and Crayola and people like that we are not selling against them. And so we are very good about filling our demographic of customer. And those are the two things I'm most proud of.
Yeah. What did the last year and a half look like for your business in terms of, it was a time of just tremendous acceleration of change, retail consolidation, so many different things happening. Was it a good season for your business? Was it a challenging season?
Yeah, I mean, believe it or not, we had our best year ever last year. I know I'm in the minority when I say that, but the beauty of licensing is something I'm approving today from a product concept doesn't hit retail for probably 16 months.
Yeah.
So when the pandemic hit, I think everyone was crushed in Q1 last year. Home orders, apparel orders, everyone was crushed. But then the buyers really turned around and started looking at, well, we do buy a year out and the pandemic should be over by next year. So they had to go back to their normal buying patterns.
Yeah.
One of those things my father taught me is you can't beat last year if you don't buy more than last year.
Hmm.
And, so they started going. And so the world of licensing, other than, maybe some royalty checks during that Q1, the world of licensing was already 18 months ahead of the pandemic. So we kind of missed it, which has been amazing. And it's, lucky for us heading into it, we had some fantastic brands that were about a year and 14 months out on. And so all our work didn't change. In fact, last year during the pandemic, we hired two people. And we just hired another person this year, a director up in Minneapolis. And we've actually strengthened during this really tough time because just the nature of the licensing business. And,
Yeah.
unfortunately and fortunately, you know, consumer products for any big IP owner tends to be the tail on a dog. And so when headcounts leave a building, consumer products is not aloof to that. They get hit. And agencies, independent agencies like us, offer them an alternative where they're not sitting on a bunch of wages when their IP is soft.
Yeah.
That, yeah, they have to pay for it in good years, but at the same rate, we're a great alternative. And we've been able to get at the end of that conveyor belt and pick up some of those brands where we have one client who eliminated their CP organization and hired us in their place. And it's,
Hmm.
it's unfortunate for those people. We never wish for that to happen, but it's been a huge benefit for us during this tough
Yeah.
year.
What's your organization look like today in terms of the number of people, the type of work that they're doing, the places geographically where they're working from, the retailer accounts perhaps that they're lined up directly against in those markets? What's your organization look like?
Yeah, right now we have 12 people in our organization. That includes one intern. That's our immediate family. Then we have another. The nature of the licensing business is a back end business. If you
Hmm.
give me the Matt Fifer brand and I put Matt on a T-shirt, I'm going to keep anywhere between 30 and 40% of the royalties from that. And
Hmm.
that 30 to 40, it all depends on, or in some cases it's 25. It all depends how hot is a brand, how hard do we have to work on that brand. If you give me, something like Among Us, which was huge last year, we're probably at the
Hmm.
lower end of that back end. But vice versa, if it's a really tough brand, we're at the higher end. So we have people spread out. Obviously Minneapolis is hyper focused on. We have them siloed, and they're focused on Target and
Yeah.
slash Best Buy and Kohl's. We have a Bentonville team who's dedicated to Walmart, and those people by day are going in there and educating buyers, just like our Minneapolis person. They're educating buyers. We're not selling product. We are selling stories. We're going in there and we're educating them on, here's the plans for Peppa Pig over the next 12 months. Here's the plans for My Little Pony. So when that supplier does come in with product from those two brands, they say, okay, I'm definitely in on those two brands.
Hmm.
And so by day, these people educate buyers and merchants and marketers on, here are the big bets. Coco Melon's one of the brands we represent in retail sales marketing. It's the hottest preschool brand on earth that we
Hmm.
can't keep anything in stock. And it's our job to educate in that scenario to not just merchants, but to key vice presidents and senior vice presidents, i.e. entertainment council, as to the strength of this brand and how we'd like to see it inside of Walmart.
Hmm.
We have, a partner up in Long Island, Colin, who's hyper focused on licensing. His main job is to oversee the licensing on behalf of our company. Kelly and Bobby are out in LA. Kelly drives all our retail sales and marketing activations. She kind of oversees all our retail sales and marketing folks, as well as drives creative vision. When we get a brand, we have to design that brand. We usually go to a third party designer that helps us create what's called style guides. And Kelly oversees that process, also product approvals and all that. And then we have a smaller version of that organization in London. So they're a little bit more of a all-American team, meaning that they have to do everything. So we have three people over in London that do retail sales and marketing on behalf of brands like Sega over there, think Sonic, as well as they do licensing for brands like Karma's World, which is Ludacris's new show about his daughter growing up. So, yeah, that's our team. They're spread out through the earth.
Yeah.
No free time for anybody.
Yeah. How long did it take in terms of kind of I'm thinking in terms of the tipping point of when you found yourself spending less time out there pitching and prospecting and more time evaluating things were brought to you. I'm just wondering, at what point was your reputation in the industry such that you didn't have to work quite so hard to be pitching to these IP holders because they knew who you were and they were coming to you?
Oh, we just got done talking about that as a team last week. That's been a three-phase. That's been a three-phase over the 5 years. That's broken up into three phases. The first 2 years, like I told you, we didn't have any licensing brands because we weren't pitching
Right.
for it, nor was anyone reaching out to us. And I'm not an ego-driven individual, and had I been, we would have probably had too many licensed brands.
Hmm.
And so then we went out and we got aggressive. And not only did we get aggressive, the partners, our current client base, got aggressive for us. So when they're at trade shows, they're saying, "Oh, you're giving up licensing rights for that? You should reach out to Retail Monster." So we had people in our corner that we had proven our worth to for 2 years, putting our names in a hat, and as well as ours. And but it was us recruiting those brands to at least give us a seat at the table to pitch them.
Hmm.
Now it's been fantastic. Now there's a couple unannounced brands, but they don't get much bigger than these two brands that reached out to us initially. And so it's completely shifted. And we've taken, the biggest licensing agents, the CAAs and the Beanstalks and the IMGs. There's some huge ones out there. We've taken, we have a new brand that we're about to announce that we took from one of those guys, and we're super excited about. So now companies are on the forefront. We're always included on the pitch process. And now
Hmm.
we just lost a bid, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks ago, to a pretty major brand that was looking for global agency to take over. And we pitched them a hybrid model like we do for a couple of our partners, but they wanted that big agency. They wanted an agency that had an office in Milan, an office in Shanghai. And we're going to continue to lose those bets unless we turbocharge our business or have someone come in and turbocharge us, from the outside. But yeah, we went from not being invited to forcing our foot through the door to the last year and a half. We're called by, which is great. So we don't always feel, we're not always on top of the game in terms of, hey, what brands are breaking left and we should pursue. Kind of like your pitcher in Arkansas, is this breaker dropping today? Is it not? But because we're on offense and because we've established ourselves in the industry, we are at least at the top of the list of getting phone calls. We're still competing with some amazing competition out there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So some people start companies to sell companies, and some people start companies because they can't imagine doing anything else. What does Retail Monster look like in 5 years? And are you and the partners still the owners at that point?
I mean, that's a great question. It's all your questions are fantastic. So thank you. Yeah, I don't know. We're next year our business is pretty fact based. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of predictions. We know what brands we're getting. We know what brands we're working on, and we have some gigantic initiatives next year. I think you got to look at the current state of politics. I'm not left or right, but the fact that you got the capital gains tax going up, and so that might put everyone off from selling in the next 4 years. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's right. So there's a lot of factors playing into that. I know that we have something special that even those biggest agents that I named earlier have called us in the past. That RSM side of our business is a key differentiator. It's not just something you can say you're going to start doing and do it. It really takes years of training. And that's been the core of everything I've done in this industry. That, I think we either got to grow or sell, right? I'm not happy staying where we are. We're used to 30% comps. And that, we're getting to that point where that 30% comp is going to be even harder. And so we have to turbocharge operations. So I think it's turbocharge or sell as your two options. And,
Yeah.
but we all love what we do. And regardless of outcome, I don't see any of us leaving. I think our work lifestyle, what we've been able to accomplish on taking care of the associates benefits 100%. We've done some things differently here that I always said, major companies. I was like, could you imagine, they pay whatever, 80% or 90% benefits. Why don't they just make it 100? Like, could you imagine the message that we're sent? And so we're doing those things as a company, and it means a lot to us. And the 401ks and those things aren't easy for a small company to start up, but we've accomplished that. And, I don't know how you keep making work-life balance any better unless I start giving people 20-hour work weeks, but that's never
Right.
So.
Yeah. So what have you, I'd like to say, what have you and your team, but I kind of want to narrow down really in these last couple of questions and really kind of focus on you. What have you as a founder yet to accomplish professionally as an entrepreneur, as a founder, that gets you out of bed, excited and wanting to play the game really hard? What have you yet to accomplish that, continues to give you that sort of inspiration, that fire?
Yeah, it's very clear. That's a another great one from you. It's clear for us. In the world of licensing agencies, there's always that MBA who's running the ROI analysis, right? There's that MBA who says, "Wow, Retail Monster really hit it out of the park for us, and they collected X and they've retained Y." That Y, we could spend half of that Y and start a vertical consumer products organization and get rid of Retail Monster. And that's in our world, licensing agents can get fired for being bad, which is normal. They also get terminated for being good, because if all of a sudden you're too successful, people up at headquarters are like, wow, we made 10 million in licensing last year, or 20 million in licensing last year, but we paid, the agent got, a third of that, or whatever the case
Right.
may be. And so, I had mentioned earlier that we're developing against 10 different IPs as a company. And people are always like, well, why do you want to get into that game? I said, all our deals with those brands are, we get licensing rights in perpetuity. That's
Yeah.
it. So if I help your brand get on a major channel, I help your brand get on a major SVOD partner, Retail Monsters are your licensing agency for the life of that brand. And
Hmm.
that's where I want to get at. And we have a couple of those that are getting really close. In fact, one just got greenlit and just got financed for the whole first season. I told you earlier about Middle School Moguls winning the Nick Parent Choice Award. And so we have a few of those. That's what I would like to see through. To be a small agency, you could imagine Iconics, who owns a lot of amazing brands. You could imagine, had they owned those brands without putting any money down. That's what we're trying to do at Retail Monster. Is we're trying to get a few brands. Listen, the likelihood a brand blows up is ultra competitive, right? I mean, Paw Patrol's eating up shelf space still. PJ Masks, Peppa Pig. You have some great brands on that preschool counter, or girls counter, or boys counter. But if on 10 IPs, if we have one breakthrough, it only takes one. Imagine if three breakthrough. Imagine if five breakthrough.
Yeah.
So that one, that never-ending chase is, how do you become a licensing agent who also owns our IP? It's like reversing the studio model. DreamWorks
Hmm.
owned Trolls, and then they made CP money. Imagine a CP company owning Trolls and then making a movie. And that's what we are working on as a company, very individually. We don't have the whole team focused on that. It's mainly a lot of my time. But if just one of those break through, it would be fantastic. But I honestly think out of the 10, I wouldn't be working on them if I didn't think all of them could break through. So I think there's a high likelihood that not only one, but several of those could break through. And that would be amazing, because then we'd have ownership stake in those brands. And it would be the gift that keeps on giving, called passive revenue, which is what we all
Yeah.
love.
Yeah. Well, last question I have is hoping to allow folks to kind of get to know you more as a human. So besides life as a founder and a CEO, who are you, and what's important to you? How do you spend your time? What motivates you to work hard at Retail Monster in terms of the life that you have outside of business?
Yeah, I mean, the people that are close to me know that my wife and I went through a lot of pain and suffering when trying to have our first child, and we were actually in the adoption process for 5 years.
Mhm.
Which, you can imagine when you're ready to have a kid and you can't, and then it takes 5 years to get one that you thought when you started it would take a year and a half. And anyone
Yeah.
in Bentonville knows that situation that we went through. And this
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
my time in London. This was my time in California, and it was really tough. And then we have William, who's now 11, who we adopted when he was 13 months old. We had a child naturally, Christopher, 4 years later. And anyone that knows me, my life's my kids. I mean,
Yeah.
it's being an old dad to start. I'm not playing catch as much as I thought of when I was a little kid, saying, when I have a kid, I'm going to play catch with them. But
Yeah.
I sleep a little bit more than that. But
Mm.
my son sets and rises with that. And Jane Connolly, my mom, great grandmother, Bob Connolly, and my other mom, Pam, fantastic parents. And they're all down here in Florida. So, the kids are, for the first time ever since we moved down here 3 years ago, have family close to them. When we were in
That's
California,
great.
no one was close. So, whatever it takes to push these kids through and be successful. And teach them some of the lessons that were taught to me, not all of them, but teach them some of the lessons that, how they can impact the world in a positive way. Like I think I've been able to accomplish through great tutelage from parents. That's it. I mean, that is
Yeah,
so if you want to know what I'm doing next weekend, you only have to ask those two kids, and that's what we're doing. So
that's great. That's great. Michael Connolly, founder and CEO of Retail Monster. This has been so much fun. I've really looked forward to this, and thank you so much for making the time to have this conversation. Let us get to know you and your organization better. And I hope you'll tell your father I said hello.
I will. I will today. So thank you
Have a
very much.
great have a great day.